I never asked to be born, but my parents, Wayne and Abigail Billy, made it clear from the start that I wasn't planned. I'm Madison, the second child they didn't want. My sister, Amber, was the one they wanted, the golden child. Growing up in the Billy house felt like living in two separate worlds. Amber's world was full of love, attention, and celebration. Mine? Coldness, indifference, and barely hidden resentment. I still remember my 8th birthday like it was yesterday. I woke up excited, hoping this year would be different. Maybe they'd remember. Maybe they'd care. When I came downstairs, Mom and Dad were sitting at the table, talking to Amber about her dance recital. "Morning," I said, trying not to sound too hopeful. Mom looked up briefly.
"Oh, Madison."
"Your cereal's in the cupboard." That was it. No happy birthday, no hug, nothing. Later that night at dinner, Dad finally remembered. "Oh, right. Happy birthday, kid," he muttered without even looking up from his plate. Mom glanced at him, surprised. "Is that today?" I thought it was next week. That night, I lay in bed holding the only birthday card I got, one from Grandma Francesca. Her words made me feel like I mattered. "My dearest Madison, happy birthday, sweetheart. You bring so much joy to my life. Never forget how special and loved you are. Love always, Grandma." I read that card over and over, trying to believe it. But how could I feel special when my own parents barely remembered I existed? School wasn't much better. Parent-teacher conferences were always a disappointment. I'd watch other kids' parents show up, proud and engaged. Mine? They always had an excuse. "Sorry, Madison," Mom would say, not sounding sorry at all. "Amber has her dance competition that day. You understand, right?" I'd nod like it didn't hurt, but it always did. The worst part was hearing them talk about me when they thought I couldn't hear. One night, I was supposed to be asleep when their voices drifted up the stairs. "I just don't get it," Dad said. "Amber is so bright and talented. Why can't Madison be more like hers?" Mom sighed.
"I know.
It's like she doesn't even try. Remember how Amber was reading at 4? Madison could barely tie her shoes at that age." Their words cut deep. Each one was a reminder that I'd never be good enough, never be wanted. As I got older, the distance between me and my parents only grew. I became quiet and kept to myself. Why try when nothing I did would ever be good enough? But there was one person who truly saw me, Grandma Francesca. Every visit to her little house felt like entering a different world, a world where I was loved, where what I said mattered, where I could just be me. When I was 13, I reached my breaking point. Home had become unbearable, and I knew I had to make a change to save myself. One day, with tears running down my face, I went to Grandma. "Grandma," I said, my voice barely a whisper, Can I live with you?" I held my breath, afraid she might say no. But her answer came immediately, full of love and warmth. "Oh, sweetheart," she said, pulling me into a hug. "You'll always have a home with me. And one day, everything I have will be yours." I melted into her arms, feeling safe for the first time in years. I didn't care about inheriting anything. I just wanted to feel loved and wanted. When my parents heard about it, their reaction didn't surprise me. They laughed. "That tiny old house," Dad scoffed. "And she works at the library for peanuts. What can she possibly offer you, Madison?" Mom just shrugged, relief clear on her face. "Well, if that's what you want, it'll definitely make things easier for us." Their indifference hurt, but it also showed me I was making the right choice. They didn't value what Grandma could give me, but they were glad to pass off their responsibility. Living with Grandma wasn't easy. Money was tight, and we often struggled to get by. Grandma worked long hours at the library, and I started doing small jobs to help. But none of that mattered because, for the first time, I felt loved and accepted. Grandma never missed a school event. She was always there, sitting in the front row, cheering for me at every presentation and award ceremony. My drawings covered her fridge, and she proudly told everyone about her brilliant granddaughter. Under her care, I started to thrive. The shy, quiet girl I had been began to fade away. I made friends, joined clubs, and my grades improved a lot. It was amazing what a little love and support could do. Even though we struggled financially, sometimes Grandma skipped meals so I could have a full plate. Our little home was filled with warmth and care. It made up for anything we didn't have. Everything felt like it was finally falling into place until one crisp autumn afternoon when Grandma came home with a look on her face that changed everything. I had never seen an expression like the one on Grandma's face before, a mix of happiness and sadness all at once. She was smiling, but her eyes were teary. "Madison, sweetheart," she said, her voice shaking. "We need to talk. It's about my sister Marilyn. She passed away unexpectedly." I barely remembered Aunt Marilyn. She was a wealthy businesswoman who had been distant from the family for years. "I'm so sorry, Grandma," I said, reaching for her hand. She squeezed it tightly and continued. "There's more, Madison. Marilyn, she left me everything. Her entire fortune. We're millionaires now, sweetheart. Multi-millionaires." The news of Grandma's inheritance spread quickly. It didn't take long for my parents to show up. One evening, there was a knock at our door. When Grandma opened it, there they were, Wayne and Abigail, smiling, with teary eyes. "Francesca," Madison, Mom said, her voice shaky in a way I'd never heard before. "We've made a terrible mistake." Dad nodded, looking more humble than I'd ever seen him. "We've been awful parents. Truly awful. But we've realized how wrong we were and we want to make things right." I stood there, frozen. These people, who had ignored me for so many years, were now begging for a second chance. "Please, Madison," Mom said, reaching out to me. "Come home. Let us be the family we should have been all along." I turned to Grandma, feeling lost and unsure. She gave me a kind smile. "It's your decision, sweetheart. Whatever you choose, I'll support you." After days of thinking it over, I decided to give them another chance. With Grandma's blessing, I packed my things and returned to the Billy house. At first, it felt like a dream come true. Mom and Dad were attentive and loving. They came to every school event, cheering loudly for me. They started giving me thoughtful gifts, not expensive, but ones that showed they were paying attention to what I liked. We even began having family game nights. I'll never forget the first time Dad ruffled my hair after I won at Monopoly, saying, "That's my girl." The feeling of warmth that spread through me was indescribable. The biggest surprise was at bedtime. Mom started tucking me in every night, something I had always wished for as a little girl. She'd smooth my hair and kiss my forehead softly. "Good night, sweetheart," she'd whisper. "We love you so much." Even Amber seemed to have changed. She started including me in her plans, introducing me to her friends, and giving me advice about boys and makeup. I wanted to believe it was real, that my family had truly changed and finally saw me for who I was. But a tiny voice in the back of my mind kept whispering doubts. Why now? Why only after Grandma came into money? I tried to push those thoughts aside, wanting to enjoy the loving family life I had always dreamed of. I called Grandma often, excitedly telling her how happy I was and how great things were at home. She always seemed glad for me, but there was a hint of concern in her voice. "Just remember, Madison," she'd say, "you always have a home with me, no matter what." Life in the Billy house found a new routine as time went on. Amber, always the golden child, graduated high school with honors and went off to a fancy college. Grandma moved into a beautiful new house and retired from her job at the library. As for me, things were finally looking up. I was 17 now, doing well in school, had a close group of friends, and even started dating. Caleb, a boy from my chemistry class, had asked me out, and I was over the moon. One Thursday evening, I had a date with Caleb at the local diner. I spent hours getting ready, changing outfits, and redoing my makeup, feeling both nervous and excited. But as I waited at the diner, my phone buzzed with a text. "Sorry, Madison. Something came up. Can't make it tonight." My heart sank. Disappointed, I left the diner and headed home earlier than I had planned. The house was quiet when I got in. I used my key to avoid waking anyone since Mom and Dad probably thought I was still out. As I walked by Dad's study, I heard voices. I was about to let them know I was home, but then I heard Mom's voice, and her words stopped me in my tracks. "I don't know how much longer I can keep up this act," she said, sounding frustrated. "I never wanted her in the first place, and pretending to love her is exhausting." I froze. My whole body went cold. Pretending to love me? Shaking, I took out my phone and hit record, unable to stop myself from listening. Dad's response made my stomach turn. "We just have to be patient. Once Mom passes, all the money will go to Madison. If we play our cards right, we can convince her to share it with us. Just think of the life we could have." I stood there, unable to move, as my world fell apart. Everything I thought I had, the loving family, the bedtime kisses, the proud smiles at my achievements, it was all fake. It was all a show, all for Grandma's money. Tears filled my eyes as the truth hit me. Every moment of love and acceptance had been a lie. What I had cherished over the past months turned out to be nothing but a calculated act. When I couldn't stand listening to their conversation any longer, I quietly walked back to the front door. Taking a deep breath to steady myself, I opened it loudly and slammed it shut. "I'm home," I called out, forcing my voice to stay steady. Mom and Dad appeared almost immediately, all smiles and fake concern. "Madison, sweetie, you're back early," Mom said, her brow furrowed with what I now recognized as fake worry. "Everything okay?" Dad added, his voice dripping with false concern. I wanted to scream at them, to call out their lies right then and there. But instead, I forced a weak smile. "Caleb canceled," I muttered, watching their faces closely. Something came up. Their reactions were perfect, too perfect. Mom clicked her tongue sympathetically, and Dad gave me a reassuring pat on the shoulder. I had to fight the urge to pull away from his touch. That night, I lay awake for hours, their cruel words replaying in my mind. By morning, I had made up my mind. I waited until I heard both cars leave the driveway. Then, I sprang into action. I packed quickly, stuffing clothes and meaningful keepsakes into my duffel bag. Without looking back, I left the house that had never felt like home and made my way to Grandma's. When I showed up on her doorstep, bags in hand, her eyes widened in shock. "Madison, what's wrong, sweetheart?" I couldn't hold it in any longer. I burst into tears, all the emotions I'd bottled up spilling out. Between sobs, I managed to pull out my phone and play the recording. As Grandma listened, her face changed. First shock, then disbelief, and finally, a deep anger I had never seen in her before. Those conniving, heartless. She stopped herself, took a deep breath, and looked at me with soft, loving eyes. "Don't you worry, honey. We'll give them a surprise they'll never forget." She pulled me into a tight hug, and for the first time since hearing that awful conversation, I felt safe. By evening, my phone started buzzing endlessly. Mom, Dad, even Amber were calling, leaving voicemails and texts. I ignored them all until I couldn't anymore. Finally, I picked up. "Hellos," I said, my voice cold. "Madison." "Oh, thank God." Mom's frantic voice came through.
Where are you?
"We've been so worried." I almost laughed at the irony. "I'm with Grandma," I replied calmly. "And we'd like to invite you all over tomorrow for a family conversation." There was silence on the other end before Mom stammered. "Of course.
We'll be there, Madison."
"Honey, whatever's wrong, we can fix it." I hung up before she could finish. Fix it? They had no idea what was about to happen. The next evening, the air felt heavy with tension as the doorbell rang. Grandma gave my hand a gentle squeeze before going to answer it. My parents stepped inside the mansion, their faces full of fake concern and affection. It made my stomach churn to see how easily they could pretend. "Madison, sweetheart," Mom began, reaching out to me. I took a step back, and confusion flickered across her face. Grandma's voice was calm but firm as she gestured to the dining room. "Please have a seat. We have a lot to discuss." As they sat down, Dad's eyes darted around the room, clearly taking in the signs of wealth. "Mom, what's this all about? Is everything okay?" he asked, his voice uneasy. Without saying a word, I placed my phone on the table and pressed play. The room filled with the sound of their own voices, cold and calculating, as they discussed their plan to manipulate me for Grandma's money. The effect was immediate. The color drained from their faces, leaving them pale and wide-eyed. Mom's hand flew to her mouth, while Dad's seemed to shrink in his chair. When the recording ended, the room fell into a heavy silence. Then they both started speaking at once, their voices a jumble of excuses and apologies. But their words sounded empty and meaningless. Grandma raised her hand, silencing them. When she spoke, her voice trembled with disappointment and barely controlled anger. "I hoped, truly believed, you had changed," she said, her words slow and deliberate. "I was even considering dividing my estate among all of you." She paused, her gaze hard and unwavering. "But now I can say with certainty that everything I have will go to Madison alone." The realization hit them like a brick wall. They hadn't just lost their scheme, they'd lost the chance to genuinely be part of a loving, wealthy family. Panic set in, and their reactions swung wildly. "Please, you have to understand," Mom begged, tears streaming down her face. "We made a mistake, but we do love Madison. We can fix this." But when their begging got them nowhere, their tone shifted. Dad's face twisted with anger. "You can't do this. We're her parents. We have rights. We'll make sure you never see her again." Francesca. Their threats didn't faze me. For the first time in my life, I felt calm and sure of what I needed to do. "I'm filing for emancipation," I said, my voice steady. "Grandma will be my legal guardian. You don't have any power over me anymore." The shock on their faces would have been almost funny if it weren't so painful. They looked between me and Grandma, unable to process that their carefully laid plans had not just failed, they had completely backfired. "I think it's time for you to leave," Grandma said firmly, her tone leaving no room for argument. She stood and gestured toward the door. My parents hesitated for a moment before walking out, and when the door closed behind them, I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. Grandma pulled me into a warm hug, and I felt the weight of the past few days start to lift. The weeks after the confrontation with my parents were a blur of legal meetings and court appearances. Grandma hired the best lawyers to help with the process of getting me emancipated and transferring guardianship to her. I had thought, naively, that my parents would give up once they were exposed. I was wrong. Wayne and Abigail fought hard to maintain control over me, and, by extension, access to Grandma's fortune. But our lawyers built a strong case, using years of neglect and emotional abuse as evidence. The recording of my parents' cruel conversation was damning, but it wasn't the only proof we had. Teachers from my old schools testified about how my parents never attended parent-teacher conferences or school events. Mrs. Randy, my third-grade teacher, spoke about the time I won the spelling bee and how neither of my parents came to see me receive my award. Neighbors also came forward. Mr. Bradley, who had lived next door to us for years, talked about the extravagant birthday parties my sister, Amber, had, while mine went completely uncelebrated. Then came the day of the final hearing. As we waited in the courtroom for the judge to arrive, I saw someone slip in quietly through the back door. Amber. When Amber took the stand, her words broke apart any remaining illusion of family loyalty. "Yes, Your Honor," she said, her voice steady. "I knew about my parents' plan to use Madison to get access to my grandmother's money." The courtroom erupted in whispers. I sat frozen, unable to believe what I was hearing. Amber continued, her tone calm and matter-of-fact. The sudden kindness, the sisterly bonding, it was all part of the act. Our parents thought it would be more convincing if I played along. Her eyes met mine briefly, and for a moment, I thought I saw regret. But it was too late. Her words were the final blow to any hope I had of mending my relationship with my family. The judge's decision came quickly and decisively. Grandma was granted full guardianship, and I was legally emancipated from Wayne and Abigail Billy. As we walked out of the courthouse, I felt an overwhelming sense of relief. For the first time in my life, I was free. I felt a strange mix of emotions, relief, sadness, and a deep sense of freedom. Grandma put her arm around my shoulders and pulled me close. "It's over, sweetheart," she said softly. You're safe now. I nodded, unable to speak because of the lump in my throat. It was over, yes, but it was also a new beginning. A chance to build a life free from manipulation and conditional love. As we drove home, I looked out the window, watching the familiar streets of my childhood pass by. I was leaving behind the family I was born into, but I was moving towards something far more meaningful, a future built on real love, respect, and acceptance. After the legal battles and emotional chaos, I found myself standing at the start of a new life. The mansion I now shared with Grandma wasn't just a house. It was a safe haven where I could finally breathe, grow, and heal. With her love and support as a constant in my life, I focused on my studies with a new sense of purpose. I wasn't trying to prove my worth to indifferent parents anymore. Instead, I was building a future for myself on my own terms. Grandma, true to her word, gave me every opportunity she could. But more than the material comforts or tutors she provided, it was her constant love and encouragement that made the biggest difference. You can be anything you want to be, Madison, she'd say with a proud smile. The world is yours. We went on adventures I had never dared to dream of before. In England, I fell in love with art and architecture. On a safari in Africa, I discovered a passion for wildlife photography. Every trip and new experience helped me uncover parts of myself I didn't know existed. But the most important work wasn't in the exciting places we visited. It was in the quiet office of Dr. Lucas, my therapist. Twice a week, I sat on her cozy couch and slowly worked through years of emotional pain. It's okay to be angry, she told me gently. It's okay to grieve the family you should have had. Over time, I began to trust again, not just others, but myself. I started to see my own worth and understand that I deserved love and respect simply for being me. As my high school graduation approached, I found myself looking back on the difficult journey that had brought me to this point. The family I had lost, the struggles I had faced, and the strength I had gained, it all led me to this moment. The family I was born into was no longer part of my life. No cards, no calls, no contact. Mom, Dad, Amber, they were now just characters in a painful chapter of my past. But losing them gave me something much more valuable: self-respect, inner strength, and the unconditional love of a grandmother who had been more of a parent to me than my biological parents ever were. The night before graduation, Grandma and I sat on the patio, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and pink. I'm so proud of you, Madison, Grandma said, reaching over to hold my hand. You've been through so much, and look at you now. You're stronger and more beautiful than ever. I felt tears well up, but for the first time, they were tears of joy. I couldn't have done it without you, Grandma. You saved me. She shook her head, smiling.
No, sweetheart.
You saved yourself. I just gave you a safe place to do it. The next day, as I stood on stage accepting my diploma, I heard Grandma's cheers above everyone else. A sense of peace washed over me. The pain of my past no longer defined me. Instead, I felt excitement for the bright future ahead. I had lost the family I was born into, but I gained something far more precious: the freedom to become who I was always meant to be. As I looked out at the crowd, my eyes met Grandma's. In that moment, I knew that whatever came next, I wouldn't face it alone.